So often, our goals and dreams evolve and change, and sometimes we're actually by a dream or something that we've held on to for a long time because you just think, wow, I've dreamt this or I thought this and this was my goal. I've got to make it happen. But you might have now gone into another stage of life and you might have a new goal. And so maybe your new goal has eclipsed that old one. And it's not that you're settling or giving up on this goal. It could just be that now you have a bigger and better goal in mind, or the Lord has replaced that entirely with something different. And that is okay.
Hello, and welcome back to the Be Unbound podcast. I'm your co-host, David Rethemeyer.
And I'm your co-host, Jonathan Brush.
And today we are joined by Alison Grant. If that name sounds familiar to you, then you may remember that we had Scott Grant on previously. And so if you enjoyed that episode, then I think that you will hear some of the same themes carried out in this episode, but from a different perspective and one that I think is every bit as valuable. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably good that it's the same themes carried out since they're a team, but it's fun to hear from the other side of the team. I don't know which one's playing offense and which one's playing defense, but we mentioned this with Scott's introduction and we'll mention it here as well. Scott and Alison are exceptional and extraordinary people. So this is an extraordinary to ordinary podcast episode that we kind of do these and highlight people that aren't famous, but we think maybe ought to be. And Scott and Alison both fall in this category. And so we did the episode with Scott. But, you know, the reason Scott could do all the things he did is because of Alison. And he said that in the podcast, so that's not our words. And so this is kind of the other side of the story. This is Alison and her expectations and her dreams and how those kind of matched into reality and what resulted from that. And I think there's lots and lots of good things Alison says. And we joked with her after we were done. We're like, that was like 2% of the email she sent us with some different ideas. What was to talk about? We could do a whole series of podcasts, and maybe we ought to with Alison. But I think if you want to pay attention to one thing, notice what Alison has to say, and at some point in this conversation, I want to summarize a little bit about your dreams, what happens when you have children, and what happens after that. And with that, we're pleased and excited to introduce you to Alison Grant. Alison Grant, welcome to the Be Unbound podcast. I'm so delighted to have you here for any number of reasons, but I think if I had to pick the top one, Alison has for many years been two things, and it's a bit of a strange double role, both a mentor in some ways in parenting and a colleague in parenting, meaning that in some ways, Alison's been ahead of me and I look and go, ooh, I should pay attention to that. And sometimes we're on the same thing and we've, supported each other and pushed ideas back and forth. There are so many things we could say that are wonderful about Alison and all that she's done. She's lived a really rich and exciting life in so many ways, but I know her best because I know her children. And I do know all six of them, have been blessed by all six of them. And today, Alison, I wanted to talk a little bit about your exciting life, but also wanted to maybe focus in a little bit because while you are certainly not done with parenting, and I don't think any of us ever do while we're still alive and taking breath, you have moved into the part where you're more done than starting. And so that gives you a really unique kind of perspective. And it's even more interesting to ask you these questions, having been able to watch the results of the hard work that you and Scott have poured into your children, into your family. And so with that introduction, tell us a little bit about how you managed to wind up on the Be Unbound podcast.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Yes, I have had a number of children go through the program starting back when it was College Plus and then the derivative since that point. But Victoria, who's now Victoria Schurter, started us off. And originally we had that homeschool vision where since we have many kids and didn't think we could afford college, we would have Victoria go through, figure out the system, then we will just replicate it right down the path. After she was in the program, she really grew to love the people, the coaching, and just saw the value of being around all of the community as well. And so that kind of changed our focus as daughters from that point on and enrolled in the program and took advantage of the coaching and the great events. And so it's been a fun journey to see our kids get involved, change through that, and eventually, come out the other end, finish college, find their community, or be a part of the Unbound community still. So it's just a great group, and I've been happy to watch and be involved in small ways when I can, always on the prayer end for all that you do as well. So we have 6 children, and that was just a funny little God story too. We thought we were going to have 2 kids, and that was it. Then God changed our mind, and a few years later, we had 2 more, and we declared that was it. And then God changed our mind, and a few years later, we adopted our 2 from Ethiopia. So that's how I get to join you on that widespread parenting journey of olders through youngers. Yes.
There's a lot we can relate to there. There is an irony there. You said you're going to send Victoria through so she can figure it out for everybody else. That's exactly what happened. She just figured it out for everybody else, meaning everybody else, like
Right.
really broad, since Victoria is our director of learning and literally does figure out how Unbound works for everybody else, including anybody who's listening to this would ever enroll somebody in Unbound. So that prophecy certainly came true. And I can relate to your other thing as well. When we got married, I wanted to have 2 kids. Kara wanted to have 4. And for a long time, I said we both got what we wanted and ended up with 6. And now we're sitting on 8, as we also have had an interesting foster adoption journey as well. And so, yeah, it's kind of an indication that we should pay attention and understand that what we think is not necessarily the way things are going to work out. And I wanted to kind of start there, Alison, because in some of our pre-podcast recording here conversation, you mentioned that you were a person that was kind of big on details and that you also had some good on planning. And at some point that you thought, hey, if I can figure out this curriculum thing for this homeschooling, I can just duplicate it times 2, times 4, times 6, whatever it is, and kind of be on that golden path. And then you shared with me and said, that's not at all the way it worked out. And I've had a similar experience. So talk a little bit about that, because I think every parent thinks this. And I think homeschool parents are particularly susceptible to this. It's like you see from a distance somebody else and you go, oh, that looked like that worked. I'll adopt that system and get that result. And then I've found that, that's not true even in our own family, one kid to the next, let alone a broader scheme.
Exactly. Yes. That was my intent at the beginning. I just thought if I had researched enough and found a great curriculum and found kind of our groove, then clearly we will have had it made and we'll just continue to replicate that. And it did not take long until I tried that same thing with child number 2 to see the error of that. Well, wow, that didn't work quite the way you thought. That child has a completely different learning style, or any number of things. Your life situation has changed, your time commitments have changed. So that was kind of a continuous surprise to me as we continued to homeschool. I just kept thinking, I'm going to really get into the groove here and settle in and to have this one thing that we do. And maybe that works for other people. That's not really how it turned out for our family. So it was sort of a pick and choose for each child, what's going to work best, what Scott's career was, how much time we had to invest in certain areas. And so that really became how we chose what we were going to do, and trying to go with the strengths and weaknesses of our kids rather than just, here's my plan and we're going to fit everyone into the plan.
Well, loyal listeners will know, Alison, that when you refer to Scott, we had Scott on the podcast earlier. And so you can go back and listen to that episode. And Scott is a pilot, a helicopter pilot, and now a chief pilot for a state law enforcement agency. And you just said something that I want to pick up on, because, Alison, I'm in a bit of this season now. And when I look back, I think maybe I've been in a bit of this season, perhaps since the first child. There's this interesting situation where sometimes we get this message that, like, hey, whatever you're doing is not as important as parenting your children. Whatever you're doing is not as important as this. And there's some truth to that. But that's not really the whole picture. I know that I took that to heart at first, and then I quickly realized something. Parenting my children included feeding them. And feeding them, especially as we multiplied, required me to be more than average at my job. In other words, in order for us to achieve what we're going to do as a family, like survival, I had to be able to get some sort of progression and be able to bring in some income to allow that to happen. And so part of taking care of my children was not being there because I had to provide. In some ways, I think Scott's position is even more stark in the sense that most of the things I've done, people could say, well, yeah, I mean, it's good, maybe. I mean, it's decent. Some people are benefiting from it. Scott's flying around, lifting people off of mountains who are about to die. And we're all like, yeah, you should definitely do that. You can catch up to the kids later. I'd like to hear you're at the other end of that, where you've got a couple things going. And I think my wife can certainly relate to this. You've got all these details you're taking care of on 6 different kids with 6 different sets of needs. You've got a husband who's in a really high performance and really high stress job. And somewhere in there, you've got to prioritize all the right things, being a mom, being a wife, being a person, doing your own thing as well. You talked about some things prior to this podcast that I thought were really interesting and really insightful. How have you juggled all that? Because I think that's everybody's question. You've got an extreme dose of that. And I'm not suggesting for a second that you've done it perfectly, but from the outside looking in, it looks to me like you've done a pretty good job. You've at least learned some things along the way. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Oh, you bet. Well, I just think the success comes from God's grace for all of us. And I think each person, and whether it's the husband or the wife and their working environment, they all have their own unique challenges. It's sort of ironic because my parents themselves were in public service. My dad was in law enforcement with the High Patrol. My mom was a nurse. So growing up, I did not like that at all. And I was just thinking, hey, when I get older, I'm for sure going to have a very typical traditional life. And my husband's probably going to be a banker and work 9 to 5, and we'll coach a little league together. And we're going to have this, very predictable schedule. And I think the Lord knew that's not what I needed. That would be me trusting in, safety and what I thought I needed. And so he gave me something very different. So I think he does that for all of us so many times. He gives us things far different than we would imagine for ourselves. And it takes trust and faith to think, oh, wow, this is actually, a good thing. I can see now many years later it was a good thing, but definitely involved some rough spots, throughout the learning curve process. And I think it's really hard to find that sweet spot that you're talking about, Jonathan. Like when you're committing that amount of time to your career and need to be gone. And so there's seasons definitely where maybe you're gone more and the other partner's taking care of more things. I for sure had the bulk of teaching and childcare while Scott had a extensive travel schedule. And so in that finding of the sweet spot, you have to always be willing to say like, hey, we could do this at home while you're following your dream. And then also trusting that when he wasn't traveling, he was 100% back investing in the family, not just out with the boys or doing things like that. And so we both tried to respect and honor what the other person was doing, because yes, you certainly have to be out working and making that career for the family. And it was our joke too, that he was often doing exciting things. And when you have a lot of little kids, it's maybe less exciting on the home front. So he would call from various locations and say, we're here for this night, we're out eating at this restaurant, or we're watching the sunset on the beach until we take off tomorrow. What are you doing? And mine was always much less exciting. Well, I'm heating up some dinner for the kids, and then we're going to play Chutes and Ladders, and that's probably it. So it's sort of a funny comparison at times to make, but they both have so much value in them.
I think it's interesting. Certainly, Scott, and we talked about this when he was on, can talk about saving lives, and that's no inconsequential thing. I can look at the other side and say, you can certainly say that you were building lives. Then it's interesting, the exponential gain of that. We just joked about Victoria now teaching people how to do Unbound for everybody. And so if you think about all the lives that touches, and then Victoria's one of 6, and all the rest of your children have extreme impacts of their own in various different places and locations. So anyhow, I suspect that we vastly, vastly underestimate the reach that you've had, Alison, in terms of the impact, because it's so much harder to trace. And yet I get just a little glimpse of that since I get to experience one small piece of it here at Unbound. And I've watched your children as they've impacted others from Unbound to Ethiopia and almost anywhere in between, including saving lives in Ashlyn's case, as she's a paramedic and is kind of right on that kind of immediate front line. Alison, I think when we've talked about this before, here's this kind of ugly reality. And I think that people know this instinctively, and yet the Instagram world makes them kind of ignore this, is that we just talked about the fact that there's not really a way to get that golden plan and then have it all work, and so like each kid's different, so we had to modify it. So whatever was the golden plan for the first one then just got completely obliterated for the second. I had my wife this morning was doing some testing, and as I walked through, she smiled. She said, we might finally have one that's able to spell. There's like it took us 6 rounds before we got to one that we thought we could effectively teach how to spell, and the rest were just really glad they were born in the age of spell check so they can make it. And so there's this aspect of trying to find the plan, not doing it. And then I find there's this aspect of like my expectation and what I'm dreaming about almost never gets realized. And that may sound depressing on the front end. And in some cases it is. There's been times where I've just looked at it and go, man, I just didn't think that we would have missed this, or we had not done this, or that we had failed to do this. I can also say with confidence that what has happened has far exceeded many of my expectations. And I'm probably definitely on the plus side. There's much more that's exceeded my expectations and much less has fallen short. Yet there is this reality that somewhere in the middle, there's this kind of where we want to be and then where we are, which is much more chaotic and much more frenzied and much more hurried than we've ever expected. You had some interesting things to say about how you've managed to, I don't think these are the words you use, but to kind of snatch those moments that then have collectively piled up into a bigger experience from that sort of wild middle that we tend to spend all of our time living in.
One of the things that we have found to be incredibly helpful is, first of all, to have a great sense of humor. I mean, laughing about it will get you a long way. And so you definitely need to laugh about it more than you need to cry about it. But we read a book a long time ago. I think it was Love is a Decision. And I think that's an old Gary Small book, if I'm not mistaken. But one of his key points was that if you can persevere in difficult times, and he used camping as an example because so many things often go wrong on a camping trip. If you can persevere and not lose your cool, not yell at one another, anything like that, those are going to be team building and unifying times. And we have certainly found that to be true also. So we have experienced a wide variety of things. A few of them stick out over the years where they've become either catchphrases or, funny little things that we can look back. They were hard at the time, but now they're funny in hindsight. They certainly were not funny at the time, much like you're saying. They were stressful, but if you can just be calm through them, one of the things that our family always laughs about is we decided to pile all 8 of us into a small RV and hit the road for 6 weeks. And I know there's people who do that well and for a very long time. I thought, 6 weeks will be a challenge. It was a great time. It did sort of feel like a circus with all of us. Each time we got out at an RV park, I kind of felt like we needed that circus music playing as everyone got out. And we were next to like the retired couple with the 15, push-outs on their gigantic motorhome. But, we're singing and laughing as we drive down the highway and someone comes up next to us and motions like, hey, you've got a problem. Yeah, we had a problem. Like we're all belting out, singing and laughing, and a tire had come off and our axle was indeed dragging on the ground. And this just led to a big problem. We pull in. We get a tow truck. There's no hotels because there is a large motorcycle convention in town. So we just sit at the park for a few hours and just try to figure out, what are we going to do? We come up with plan B. We drive 2 hours away where there was a hotel. It happened to have a great water park feature and the kids had a great time. And we were able to order in some great Ethiopian food that the boys loved. And so we can look back and think, wow, that could have been a horrible day and ended up being a really fun day and a fun adventure that we still laugh about all these years later. And so much of our life journey, I think, can be things like that. We don't know which way it's going to go yet, but if we can just maintain our cool in the midst, it will certainly help us. And that has been, I'm not going to lie, a work in progress for me because of those expectations. I usually always have an expectation in my mind and how it needs to turn out, or wouldn't it be great if this is what happened? And I usually have to reel myself in and be open to other possibilities.
Well, I was laughing as you were telling the stories. Just last night, Kara made reservations for our second week of a camping trip that we're going on this summer. And the reason we had delayed on these was that the campsite doesn't allow as many people on a site as we have. So we called and tried to get permission to stay the first time and failed. And so we waited 3 weeks and called again. And we did succeed last night. They're like, oh, sure, you can have your whole family. But it's kind of, I think of the circus music as well. Also, years ago, we were in Maine camping and we had little kids and it rained for 2 solid weeks when it rained, like in Maine. Actually, like on the way up, it started raining. And at the same place when we crossed in Pennsylvania, coming back down to Virginia, it stopped raining. In between, it rained almost constantly. And at one point, we were in a tent with little children in this campsite. And I was taking the trash and I'm trudging and I'm just, it's just pouring down, running off my hat and all this kind of stuff. And I'm carrying the trash to the dumpster and I look and there's a beautiful trailer RV with golden light coming out of it. And there's a guy inside reading his paper, kicked back on an easy chair. And his wife is like sitting reading a book on the other side. And my very uncharitable, non-Christian thought was, we could take him. Like a surprise attack out of the dark. They'd never know was coming. We've got them completely outnumbered. I mean, we could be in this thing and have taken over in no time flat. Well, looking back and kind of thinking about those things, I think what you said is really important because you said maintaining calm. I think there's a real pivotal point there that I'm not sure that I want to come back and look at a little harder because here's the reality. We're all going to, if we live on this planet, and more so if we're going to live on this planet with the added complication of children, is that we're going to have this chaos that exceeds our expectations. And we're going to have this uncertainty and this kind of mess that in some ways feels like it never quite resolves. And that means that there's going to be those friction points. And those friction points will be memory points. The difference is what kind of memories. So when I hear you say about you lose an axle going down the road, or you're camping and doing some stuff together, or all these different things, I think those are the moments where we have decision. You can turn this into a trauma point for our family. That people look back on and say, that's why I left. That's why I went and did something different. Or you can turn those points into those things where, while they may not have been super fun at the time, they end up becoming these really funny stories later. And that starts with the reaction. And so is that something that you learned en route? Is that something that you brought to the table? What was it that allowed you to make that decision where, even in the midst of the axle drag on the highway, you go, this isn't fun, but we're going to treat this with calm instead of making this a trauma point for our family later?
No, I would love to say that I was just born that way, but nothing could be further from the truth. So definitely it is still, like, I'm not joking, still a work in progress. I've actually learned that from my husband and my kids. Our older kids have just been great at being adventurous and helping us laugh about things that we might otherwise go, oh my goodness, this is going to be a disaster. And that's why I think the Lord is gracious. Sometimes he gifts us with those older kids that can help set a great tone for the younger kids and just really make your life a little bit easier. And that was certainly the case with us. So learning along the way, then learning from the mistakes that we made earlier, like, oh, wow, that did not turn out well. Let's try that 180 degrees different, and see what we can do. But I really do think it is just being willing to let go of the expectations and see how things are going to play out. And so I know that my kids have taught me, they've been my role models in that regard, them being so open to, hey, this could be fun. This could be fun. And I'm like, oh, I really thought we were going to do this. But so that's been a great thing of them being the teacher to me.
What are some of the most unexpected things you've gotten into that you never saw coming? I know enough about your family to know a whole bunch of wild stories and things you've done. So, but from your perspective, what are the things you're like, yeah, I cannot believe that ended up actually happening?
It is ironic that part of our heart has landed in Africa, because if you would have asked me anytime as a child, I would have said my worst dream was like, please don't ever make me be a missionary or go to Africa. And so all these years later, I have not become a missionary to Africa, but we do have two boys who've joined our family from Africa. And actually, pretty much all of my girls have been to Africa on short-term mission trips. So the Lord did not ask it of me, but he did ask it of my kids, which as a parent might be even harder to let your kids go and do things that you're nervous about. But so that is especially ironic to me. And they have done great. They've been to Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and several places. That sort of blows my mind coming from my family growing up.
Well, one of my daughters has been to Africa with your daughters, and that blew my mind a little bit. So
you're welcome, Jonathan. Now you can join we're in the same club again.
Yeah, I think I actually got some peer support from both Scott and Allison. Well, that was you want to go to Africa with the girls,
right? Letting your kids dream dreams that are bigger than what you would have thought. Yes, some of my kids have dreamed some scary dreams, and letting go and letting them pursue their dreams has also been like, oh, okay. You go and do that, even though it's dangerous, or, wow, I didn't see that. And my life has been much bigger than I would have thought originally from what I said. Hey, I thought I'd do this small thing, and the Lord's, really shaken it up and done different things. But I've had the opportunity to examine that and look back and just think, wow, that has been great. I have no regrets and just feel blessed that we've been able to do what we've been able to do. And so that's just the grace of God, knowing my heart's desires even more than I did.
I think that's a profound statement, Allison. You said that your life's been bigger than you expected. That's an interesting countercultural message in a world that really spends a lot of time telling people that they have to sacrifice all their dreams to have children. And it's interesting. Let me see if you think this is an accurate statement based on what you said. I'm kind of listening to your whole story and what you've been talking about here. And I'm almost forced to say, yes, you did sacrifice your dreams to have children. Mm-hmm. And then they got replaced by something bigger. So it's not that statement is untrue. You may have to lay your dreams down at that altar, but that's not the end of the story, that there's something far bigger on the other side that is, frankly, a bit unimaginable from where you're standing now. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So is that an accurate sort of summation of some of the things you've been saying?
Yeah, no, I think that would be, because so often our goals and dreams evolve and change, and sometimes we're actually hampered by a dream or something that we've held on to for a long time, because you just think, wow, I've dreamt this or I thought this and this was my goal. I've got to make it happen. But you might have now gone into another stage of life and you might have a new goal. And so maybe your new goal has eclipsed that old one. And it's not that you're settling or giving up on this goal. It could just be that now you have a bigger and better goal in mind, or the Lord has replaced that entirely with something different. And that is okay. Or maybe for a season of life, you're going to put one or two interests and hobbies behind and you can pick those up later and you're going to focus on something different. And so I think that's how it's worked, for me. And maybe it wasn't as peaceful as I would have thought, like, oh, wow, it's just been kind of pieced together. But in hindsight, like I've had the chance to just look and think, wow, that has been great. I don't have any regrets. And yet I have spoken to a lot of people when, they maybe have asked, like, what have you done with your life? Do you have kids, this and that? And I have talked to so many people who've said, oh, I wish we would have had more kids. I wish we would have done this. But we couldn't because we lived here, or this is my job, or this or that. And so I think that's what I feel grateful for is, the Lord has allowed us to pursue the things that he put in our heart and without regret. And there's been sacrifice to make those things happen, certainly. We've lived in other places, lived in we've always had like the small homes, the used cars, the things. Yeah. We weren't chasing the big things, but I have zero regrets about that. We have many fun memories of the girls sharing. The four girls actually had to share a room once the boys joined the family. And when my dad came and saw our double set of bunk beds in there, he suddenly joked that it reminded him of his Navy days and those ships. Wow, you're really packed in here. But things like that, again, just were an opportunity to laugh and grow and learn some good skills for life.
The thing that I think stands out to me is the fact that I think that takes a lot of humility to be able to just say something like that and to be able to say, you know what, like maybe my goals have looked differently in the past, but what God is leading me to is better. I think in the generations that we see currently talking about goals and ambitions, it's very much a tunnel vision focus on what they have in front of them and what they're wanting to accomplish. But what I hear you saying is that if you let go of your goals and say, God, my goal is to set out on the journey that you have in front of me, then that can end up being so much more fulfilling. And I think it's just really cool to hear that and really refreshing to hear that. And in a way, it seems like it almost takes some of the pressure off of yourself to perform and to accomplish all of those things when you're able to keep that mindset. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, in a sense, I think it's hard to always find the sweet spot. And I still struggle with this. My girls laugh at me because I usually write things, quickly during my Bible time. And usually I grab a napkin. So I have all sorts of napkin notes shoved in my Bible. And one of them that I've mulled over for a long time is how to passionately pursue something while also holding it loosely. And so that napkin has moved into my Bible in many different ways. But I think that really is the choice that we have to face, knowing when to passionately pursue something, that dream, and hold on to it and just keep working on it, and when to be flexible and notice that the Lord is moving us somewhere else. And hey, maybe it's a new dream. Maybe that's going to be shelved for a while. And that is definitely a tension, passionately pursuing with excellence while at the same time holding loosely for the Lord to move as he sees fit to do so. If you all figure out how to do that well, you let me know. I'm going to scribble that on my napkin as well. Be able to file that one away.
Alison, did any of your kids pick up threads of things that you were interested in and take them farther?
Yeah, both Victoria and Ashlyn were my horse people. I loved horses growing up, and I was a Western person. They took it into the whole English realm with 3-day eventing, again, letting them go do scary things. You're like, wow, didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Yeah, Savannah went far deep into dog training and then military history. So she's taken our family's love of military history and our military service and kind of put those two things together, and has really broadened our eyes with her college study in military history. So that's been very interesting also. And then Laramie is definitely on the service-oriented route, taking after Grandma, who always wanted a nurse or a teacher, and isn't really pursuing it in that route, but she definitely has that heart of service. So we're excited to see where she's going to go with.
I just have thought, so often back to our theme of we have to give up your dreams and that then the dreams become bigger. I have found myself often doing things that I had dreamed about doing, but if I'm really honest with myself, I wasn't about to do. And so this last Saturday, while David was running a Tough Mudder, I was in the middle of running a triathlon leg that my daughter had signed us up for. And then I came back from our Capstone event in Colorado and then realized that 2 days later, I was going to be doing the canoe leg with my son. And was kind of like, how in the world did I get in this position? But it was really interesting. I got there. I've known about this particular race, which is about 2 hours from our house, for years. And I've always thought, oh, that'd be fun to do. That'd be fun. And honestly, never thought more than that. And then found myself in the middle of just clawing this canoe down the river, trying to pass everybody else and go, how did I get signed up for this? And then a couple of years ago, I found myself riding a motorcycle in some extremely questionable terrain and thinking, this is the kind of thing that I thought was cool. I was not interested in doing. I mean, I wasn't actually going to do it. And then I'm following my son, who, now has a motorcycle, which is why I had a motorcycle, which is why I'm riding with this thing. And so there's also an aspect where oftentimes you might find that your kids end up pulling you into fulfilling your dreams if you have the right relationship in ways that I didn't expect to have happen.
Right.
Well, Alison, I was thinking as you were telling the stories, and I didn't think about this before our event, but as I just referred to, we recently were in Colorado. And in terms of the impact of the moments that you have, so you spend a lot of time here in the middle of this podcast talking about you have these things, they go wrong, and then it's your attitude that changes everything. We had an interesting situation where we were done with an event. It's a very exhausting event. It's great. We have a ton of fun, but we were all very tired. You prayed us through it from afar. And so we really appreciated that. Savannah was speaking there and she had some really good content. Victoria was speaking there. And of course, Victoria's on our staff and was working there. And so we get done. We go from Estes, which is where we have the event, down to Denver. We eat dinner. We're all very worn out. And wonderful logistics coordinator, Olivia, who's been on this podcast, had moved our hotel so that we have a hotel with a shuttle. Victoria and I had been in charge of the vans. And so she had one for our team. We had to return these minivans. And as we got ready to go, Victoria said, I'm so glad that we get to return these tonight because we had very early flights in the morning. I was coming home and was exhausted and getting ready to go to triathlon. Victoria was actually flying to another event where she was speaking at a conference representing Unbound. And so she had a ton of work still lying ahead of her. Both of us had extremely early flights. And of course, Denver's got a really long car shuttle. And so you want to get those things back early. So anyhow, so Victoria switched it because we had the shuttle from the hotel. Oh, this is delightful. So we dropped everybody off at the hotel. Victoria and I start running back. Turns out it's like 35 minutes because there was construction. So I drive 30 minutes and I'm almost at the airport and I see Olivia calling me. And I thought, oh, that's not good. So I answer it and Olivia says, hey, the hotel says they have a shuttle, but the shuttle only runs at 6 a.m., which is not enough for us. I knew that. The website actually says that they contract the shuttle for any flights earlier. So I went down to sign us up for it and they just said, sorry, we don't have a driver. So in other words, it's on their website. They promised it. It was there. That's why we picked that hotel. And they're just like, yes, it's not our problem. And so I was like, so what are you saying? She's like, well, I'm saying we need the cars. Like we can't get to the airport tomorrow morning unless we have the vans. So I was like, oh, great. So it's late now. I just burned half an hour driving. I'm going to burn half an hour driving back, which cost me an hour worth of sleep, which now means I'm going to have another hour and a half lost of sleep at the other end because I've now got to return this rental car. So I'm like, fine. So I said, you call Victoria? She's like, I did, but it went to voicemail. I'll call her again. I was like, so I turn around and drive back. I park in the parking lot and the phone rings and it's Victoria. I said, what are you doing? And she said, where are you? I said, what do you mean, where am I? And she said, I've been sitting here waiting for you guys for 20 minutes because we had another colleague coming along who lives in the area who was going to drive us back. I said, you didn't return the van, did you? And she said, just to return the van? What am I supposed to do? Like, I was supposed to return the van. And I was like, did you get Olivia's message? She said, I didn't hear anything from Olivia. And so anyhow, technical difficulties with the phone. It was accidentally on Do Not Disturb. She never got the message from Olivia, so she'd returned the van. So I was like, we need the van. So you're going to have to pick the van back up and you're going to have to drive back here. And there's a pause. And I'm like, if I'm Victoria, I just drove half an hour to return a van. I just waited 25 minutes for people to pick me up. They didn't come. Now I'm going to have to spend another hour getting the van back out of the rental car place and then half an hour drive back to find that I lost an hour and a half on the other end. I'm frustrated just saying it, and Victoria she says, well, isn't life fun? She said, there's always something new to learn. And she said, I guess I'll see you later. And she hung up. Now, for all I know, she kicked the windows out of the van and cried after that. I have no idea. But I'm just telling you, Alison, that there was years of training that enabled her to make that decision right then, because that wasn't my feeling right now. But I will tell you to work with colleagues like that, to work with people that in that kind of situation react with a smile and are like, well, isn't this interesting? This will be, I think the final thing was that this is going to be a good story. Maybe not tonight. It's the way she said that. And, that sounds like a small story. It's just a little bit of lost sleep on a rental van thing. And yet it is a story. Like I'm telling it now, just a week later, right? And we will tell that story later. And we have all kinds of crazy rental car stories from our events that are, at the time we're close to homicide and then turned out to be really fun. And I'm thinking like that's where that starts, and that kind of long time life training to do those things. And for me, it's paying off in spades. So I'm really deeply appreciative.
Oh, man.
Well, Alison, as we wrap up here, anything else that you want to add to this conversation? Because I think you carry so much experience and so much perspective and so much faithfulness. I won't saddle you with any kind of label that says you've done anything perfectly or have no mistakes or anything like that. That's not realistic. But I do know that you have been faithful, and it shows, and the results have far exceeded, I don't know about your expectations, but certainly the results have blessed others a disproportionate amount. Me, and Unbound, chief among my own children, and the people I see your folks interacting with, and myself as I've watched you and Scott, sometimes from afar as we're on different sides of the continent, and sometimes close together as we get to share time together.
I guess I would just close with what the Lord has been putting on my heart lately, and that's just not to grow weary in doing good. So often we go through those seasons and it seems to stretch out much longer than we want to. But, like it says, do not grow weary in doing good, because in due season we will reap if we do not lose heart. And it's just that waiting for the due season, persevering, being resilient. And so often it's a labor of love. That's the other thing that's come out through our Thessalonian study that I've been doing lately. That the labor of love is the catchphrase that caught me, because the labor part, sometimes loving is easy and sometimes loving is a labor. So just when it's in a difficult season, you're laboring, the Lord just wants us to not grow weary.
Well, that's an apt reminder for me right now. So if you're listening to this and it's an apt reminder for you, we'll count that as God's blessing. But at the very least, Alison, those were important words for me at this particular junction. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your ongoing sacrifice, and thank you for all the ways you blessed us. And thank you for your prayers as we were in Colorado shifting rental cars this last week.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight.
Well, that did not disappoint, David. It was fun to hear the other side of it. And like I said, we could talk to Alison for another 3 hours and still be gaining a lot. In so many ways, Scott and Alison have been excellent mentors as well as fellow travelers on this parenting road. And it was really a pleasure to have both of them on, and Alison here most recently. It was a fun conversation.
It's always fun to hear. We've had several people on this podcast over the past several weeks talking about their perspectives on parenting and how it just shifts your mindset and the way that God ends up using it to grow you. And I think Alison hit on a lot of really some of the most important themes that I think we've seen throughout, which is really just that A, it's not about you, and B, God is going to do far greater things than you would ever expect through your parenting journey, as long as you are conscious of the fact that A, it's not about you and it's about what God's doing.
Well, it was really interesting to have this conversation with Alison. We just spent last week, or most of last week, in Colorado with Victoria, which makes sense. Victoria is head of division and part of our team, but also Savannah. Savannah is Victoria's sister, obviously Scott and Alison's daughter, and a graduate from Ascend, has helped us out in various ways through the years, and was speaking along with friend Melissa at our event. And so to listen to them talk, it was interesting because they had a story that mirrored this, parents, but it went sort of like this. I had high hopes. I then kind of encountered the world, and I found the world quite dark. And I ran into a lot of evil and a lot of problems. And now, to be clear, when I say they found the world quite dark, this is not a story of Savannah falling, kind of making bad decisions. This is a story of Savannah running into the darkness and fighting it. And so it was a story of Savannah battling that and then being a bit overwhelmed. And then coming out the other end and saying, I had even more hope at the end of that. And it's interesting that that echoes Alison's sort of parenting journey. I had to sort of sacrifice my dreams, and then what happened exceeded my expectations. I can't help but think, David, that there's an important message here. And one of the things that we certainly encountered at Capstone is we get to work with students from all kinds of places and all kinds of backgrounds, is that in many ways, young people, and maybe all of us, are struggling a lot with hope in these times. And just listen to what Alison said. There's going to be things that are harder than you expect. They're going to be worse than you expect in some ways. You're going to have to set aside or adjust some dreams. Don't stop there. That's true. That's not the truth. The truth is, on the other side of that are dreams that exceed your expectations, are things bigger than you ever realized and imagined, are opportunities and possibilities and stories that you never thought were going to happen. And that is just as true as the first part. It is true that you're going to run into difficulties. It is also true that you're going to run into things that exceed your expectations. And to be able to hold to both, I think, is in some ways the definition of hope based in reality. Reality is things are going to be hard. I'm going to have to drop some things. Hope is, and there's going to be things that exceed my expectations. And I just thought Alison did a beautiful job of putting that in the context of parenting. And as a parent, I can sort of relate to that and see some of those places where it's true. And I can also grasp onto that and hope in it because there's some places that are hard right. Well, we talked about Capstone. We were just at Capstone. It's the last live event of the year for our students in our Ascend program. It is the Capstone event. It's not named that accidentally. And it was that. It was a great place to be. We flew into Denver where we left Virginia. I left Virginia where it was 80 degrees. I don't know what was the temperature in Missouri when we left.
It was pretty similar in Missouri, yeah.
Yeah, so David and I left the South, so to speak, when it was warm. We landed in Denver where it proceeded to dump 8 inches of snow on us the first night in Denver. And then we went up to Estes where it snowed a little bit and it got sunshine a little bit. And then I got seriously sunburned on the last day because we went hiking. And so, it was typical Colorado weather up there. And we had a beautiful location in the Rockies. It's a beautiful group of people. It was a great location, the place that we actually host the event at. And all those things work together. In terms of events, it was one of the smoother we've run, and we tend to have people that smooth events. And then Capstone is marked by a high point relationally, where students really have a lot of contact and sharing and discussions and things like that. And this Capstone met those expectations. And so I certainly left feeling like I was a lot closer to students than I was when I started. Students there that I've known for a long time that I got to know better. We're to the point now that we're big enough. There were students there that I didn't know before that I got to know. And so that was really fun too. And for me, it was, out of all the events we've done recently, I get to spend more time with students than I have in a long time. David may not be able to say that, but that's because David has like 18 jobs at these events. And so, he does talk to students, but that's in between, all the other stuff. And we don't really expect him to eat or sleep, right, David?
Yeah, those things are optional.
Yeah, that's optional. So, but we did have the absolute honor of having David's parents who came to help us. And so you talk about glutton for punishment. They came to volunteer to hang out with us crazy people. And so, David, that was a lot of fun to meet your parents and super great to have them there. And they added a ton to the event. And it was fun. This was a fun event because we had extra help in the form of several folks, including David's parents that were there. We also had a large crowd of Unbound alumni children. And so we had, we had a 7-month-old, a 9-month-old, 2-month-old, I think. And is Evelyn 2 years old, 2 or 3 years old? And so anyhow, so we had, in addition to our students, we had some very young children there that I just was an absolute blessing to be sharing that event with them and to see. Some of them are staff children and some of them are children of alumni. And that was really, really fun to spend the time with them.
Yeah, it was so cool because it was our goal going into Capstone to talk a lot about hope. And then to talk about hope and then have the perspective from multiple generations, from, in some cases, 3 generations of people who are followers of Christ and who are engaged and active in the Unbound community and are actively choosing hope and sharing that hope with others was a really cool picture to see in action there at the event.
We had a lot to celebrate. We also had the event not too long after 2 of our staff also got engaged. And so our congratulations can officially go out from the podcast. We've already done this internally to Tim and Melissa. And so it was fun to see them together there as well. And lots of hope and lots of things in the future to be excited about. If you're interested in joining that kind of crazy, got all kinds of people there, events and all those things, Ascend is the name of our flagship program. It is a post-high school program. You can do it if you're a homeschool student as a dual enrollment course inside of high school. You can do it as a college alternative. And I don't know that we like calling it a college alternative. We call it an educational training program that trains young adults to thrive. And we do that through skill-based learning, project-based education, and live events like Capstone. Every time we are in a live place with our students, we're reminded of what exceptional people join the program, how much fun we get to have with them. And then, in this kind of event with Capstone, we get to see the trajectory of students that we met first, in the case in Michigan last year for Apex, And then we saw them again at base camp in Alabama, and now see them at Capstone. Next year, we'll see them 3 times before Capstone. There's 4 live events total. And just to see who they were when they started and who they are now. And then we have the pleasure of seeing students back, 2nd and 3rd year students, and now, of course, alumni, in the sense that we had alumni speakers and helping staff there. And to see where they are, it is a remarkable thing. It is full of God's grace and God's glory, and it's worth being a part of. So check out our recap videos on our YouTube channel if you want to see what it looks like. Capstone video from this year is not out yet, but will be soon. But you can look at past recap videos. And then also we offer a high school program. We offer a full high school program where we work with My Father's World to do a full curriculum called Declare. And we run a program called Equip that works with any homeschool high school curriculum. And we just finished up yesterday with an exciting piece of news, which is we've enrolled as many students now as we did in the entire year last year. So that high school program is growing tremendously. And if you're interested in that, maybe it's best not to wait too long, because we really had this problem before, but there is a capacity issue at some point. And this year we might actually be flirting with that. So if you're interested at all in our Equip program, maybe check that out sooner than later while we do still have spots available. But it's growing rapidly, and it's been a lot of fun. And we have a great time with those students, many of whom then all end up in Ascend, and we get to hang out with them in places like Colorado.
I think just a fun tie together would be just if you are looking for your student to be able to embrace hope, as we've talked about over the course of this episode, and as we talked about at Capstone, is that's something that we got to see live in person, is that all of our students looking at how God is working their stories together to have hope. And so that is really, I think, just about one of the most encouraging things that I think we as the Unbound staff can take away from being able to enroll our students and be able to say, hey, we try to teach them all these different skills and things, but ultimately, if we can point them to hope, then that's about the biggest victory that we can claim. So would just encourage you, if you have a young person who you think could use hope and a community of people to point them to that hope, then check us out.
Amen. Until next time, be unbound.